Bibliosophie.
Let us start. Hello, my name is Sophie. I like books, and quite appropriately, this is Bibliosophie, my brand new booktube channel. I am now a booktuber, and this is, congratulations, my very first attempt at filming a booktube content. So, I am starting from a very vast place. I realize I have been collecting an inordinate number of library books from my local library for the past few weeks, and I thought I would just show you what I've got, some of which I am in process of reading, a couple of which I have finished. I think only one of which actually I've finished. Probably some that I will not read, and some which sort of I happened upon, some which I requested. In any case, it was a really good pretext to gather in two rather large piles everything that I have out. So, number one, this is the pile of books that I specifically was looking for and ideally would plan to read, but we'll see if I get to everything. We've only got one fiction on here, and this is Speedboat by Renata Adler. I don't know, quite honestly, if I'm going to get to it because it's due in 7 days, I think, and it has a hold on it. It's quite popular currently, so if I read it in the next 7 days, I'll read it, and if not, maybe I'll read it in the future. This is from the 70s. I honestly don't know what it's about, but New York Review of Books, beautiful cover. I was sort of lulled into it, and it's meant to be sort of a genre-bending novel in some ways, a touchstone over the years for writers as different as David Foster Wallace and Elizabeth Hardwick. Speedboat returns to enthrall a new generation of readers. Honestly, not sure exactly what it's about, but it looks like I'll like it. And I confess I really don't know anything about Renata Adler. But I do like the very first line. Nobody died that year, nobody prospered, there were no births or marriages. I'm in. Let's see if I actually get to reading it. Then we have a whole stack of nonfiction. Worn, A People's History of Clothing by Sophie Thanhauser, which is, as it purports to be, a history of cloth as well as clothing. I believe she goes into linen, cotton, silk, synthetics, and wool. And I saw this recommended or blurbed in The New Yorker in the briefly noted section. It caught my eye, so I'd like to at least pop into this since it's quite new. Also, it has some reserves on it, so we'll see how much I get through it in the next, I think I've got about 2 weeks on this one, but it looks quite fascinating, and let's see if I get to it. The Golden Thread, The Story of Writing by Ewan Clayton. This is what it also purports to be, I think. I don't know if I'll get to it, quite honestly, but I believe the library catalog sort of recommended this to me as something that would interest me, and they're quite right. This is absolutely the sort of thing that I am into, but it is a history of writing. I may or may not dip into it. I think it's quite fascinating, but I've got a lot else to read, so we'll see. Sharon Cameron, and this is a series of essays called The Bond of the Furthest Apart. It's essays on Kafka, Dostoevsky, Tolstoy, and Bresson, I think. Yes, and I haven't started this at all. I will probably not read all of it, but I would like to dip in and out of it. I quite love this horse cover, actually. And I have never read any of her stuff, but several people have recommended her books. Specifically, she's got a book on Emily Dickinson, in fact, which is what I was looking for. But actually the library didn't have it, they recommended this instead, or rather, they had this instead, and I took it as a recommendation that I should look into it. So ideally, I'll read at least a few of these essays at some point. Another sort of, I don't know, passion idea is just a sort of biography of George Eliot by Barbara Hardy. And this is kind of a critical biography, so it also goes in to her works and how her life intersects essentially with her works. I don't know if I'll get to this one, quite honestly, but I'd like to. I have been, and you'll soon see, really in a mood to read about novelists especially, but creators, creative types in general recently, and specifically female ones. So I've been reading, quite a lot actually of author biographies, and if it can also talk about their works, I really like that. So we'll see. This is essentially a huge stack of, we'll see. Speaking of female creators, You Are Beautiful and You Are Alone, which is a biography of Nico by Jennifer Otter Bickerdike, Ooh, that's an unfortunate name change. I'm sorry, Dr. Jennifer Otter Bickerdike, for renaming you. And this is a biography of Nico, the famous personnage, really, and singer, of course, who sang with Velvet Underground very famously, and is in various movies, and so it's sort of a really good snapshot of a certain time and place, which is really why I'm liking reading biographies. Last week, a friend of mine asked me what I like about reading biographies, what holds me, and it is sort of that good pretext of seeing history from a more personal vantage point, and especially cultural history, which interests me, and arts history, literary history, etc. And Bickerdike is a historian, a cultural historian, rock and roll historian, essentially. And this seems really good. I hope I will get to it. I don't have any call to get to it, but I really, really would like to. This was recommended actually by Hannah May. I'll list her channel, or rather by Hannah's partner. I don't know if Hannah herself has read the biography, but I saw that episode and decided to make a request from my local library as a result. Two more lady authors. We've got A Life of Colette by Judith Thurman, which is called Secrets of the Flesh, very appropriately. Colette, the sort of fille terrible of late 19th century, early 20th century Parisian literary world. And I'm actually about halfway through the book. It's quite good. I attempted to listen to it a bit on audiobook because my library also has it read, but I couldn't do it, mostly because of French pronunciation, which was just not quite right, and it just got annoying. But this is a very fascinating, if problematic, personage, modernist, but also somewhat old-fashioned, in terms of being kind of repressive and definitely anti-Semitic, but also absolutely a huge figure in feminism, sort of despite herself, queer icon, just generally flamboyant creature of who made the evolution from kind of gamine, almost child prodigy, let's say early adult prodigy, to kind of a venerable lady of letters in some ways. So this has been great. I do plan at some point to finish this, and it's a little bit more, quote, useful for my non-pleasure reading life. I'm a singer, and I specialize a lot in early 20th century classical repertoire as well as late 19th century, so I can at least make a call that I'm reading about these very important figures who relate to my line of study in my profession. That's at least the idea. And in fact, so is Elizabeth Bishop, another poet, American-Canadian poet, from the 20th century. This is a biography of her by Thomas Travisano, which I just finished early this week, in fact. And I'll actually talk about it some more in another video, a planned video. So Elizabeth Bishop, another just huge poetic influence, sort of under the radar for a long time, and then who became a lot more respected and beloved. I wonder if my vision of her is maybe outsized because a lot of composers that I like have set her poetry. So maybe she doesn't loom as large as she seems to loom for me. But I really enjoyed this biography. It's a fascinating and sort of sad life. Another queer icon, and it's interesting to kind of read from the perspective of kind of her early childhood trauma, for lack of a better word, really, experience of loss and grief. So Travisano goes a lot into the kind of sadness part, the formative sadness of Bishop's life, leading to her works, her attachment styles later, and covering up her poor face, and her kind of famous alcoholism on and off throughout her adult years. So these are the books that I actually meant to get out for one reason or another, even if they're not per se, you know, necessary to my life. And then quickly some sort of coup de cœur, some things that just sort of caught my eye. What's wonderful about the library is that I think it sort of scratches the itch of that very capitalistic itch of wanting to get something in order to make ourselves happier. Just, oh, something's missing from my life. I'm very, very sad. Probably I need to go out and purchase this new object. I need a new toy, which I confess I am very much prone to as well. I think most of us are. But with a library, you don't have to pay, and you give it back, but you get to have that excitement of a new thing, a new shiny thing. So I've really, really enjoyed requesting things, and then you show up and you have a book waiting for you, and it has your name on it, and it's just there for you. You've got your little like Delphus Soph waiting for you in the stacks, and you go pick it up, and it's a present that you made for yourself, that your social system made to you. Makes you feel loved. But then also there's the beauty of being able to just walk around the stacks and take things off the shelf that look nice. And so I've been doing that a little bit too, seeing what catches my eye, and I've made some nice discoveries actually as a result. So, I picked up, speaking of 20th century poets, I picked up the essential Muriel Ruckeyser, and I plan to dip in and out of this. Also, I really like Ruckeyser's poetry, what I know of it, and I would love to read more of it, so I plan to sort of chew on it every so often, which is usually how I consume poetry. These two books are new releases and new to the library. Embouchure, or Embouchure, I assume probably she pronounces it Embouchure, by Emilia Phillips, and Lion's Paw by Kathleen Peirce. And I've not at all looked into Lion's Paw, which came out apparently in September 2021, but it's a series of poetry, which the title caught my, yes, the title, but the cover is what I meant. The cover caught my eye in the new poetry section, and I was looking through it slightly. It looked like I would enjoy it, so I am excited to discover a new poet. And Emilia Phillips, actually, whom I think I may have misgendered. I think maybe Emilia Phillips goes by they. I will check. I will check and put a little note. And this is a book of poetry also, which I've made my way partially through and have really liked, actually. And yeah, I was quite, as a classical musician, the second poem, which is called "My Mother Confessed I Was Conceived to Ravel's Bolero, and so began the formality of my embarrassment," just really did me in, I have to say. So when I was in the library, I felt that I needed to check this out. And I've really enjoyed, actually, what I've read throughout this. So I recommend this very much. Even more poetry. Baudelaire, Les Fleurs du Mal, The Flowers of Evil, in a new translation by Aaron Poochigian. And mostly this cover, this absolutely gorgeous cover, caught my eye. So I was intrigued. I'm intrigued to see what he does with the translations. I'm always intrigued to see what people do with translations. Poochigian is a poet and translator. But mostly I also wanted to read the introduction by Dana Gioia. This absolutely is in my area of study, so interested to read more and of Charles Baudelaire from new and different voices, essentially. And then we've got all novels and short stories from a couple of days ago, where I just sort of picked things up from the fiction shelves. I picked up two Silvina Ocampo, Forgotten Journey, which is a series of short stories which I'd never heard of, and then The Promise, also by Ocampo. And The Promise, somebody was reading The Promise, and I was intrigued. I want to say, I cannot remember which person was reading The Promise, but I was intrigued. This is about a woman who is, I believe, drowning. Yeah, a woman traveling on a transatlantic ship has fallen overboard. Adrift at sea, she makes a promise to Saint Rita that if she survives, she will write her life story. And so it's a very short little boy, and a sort of novella about, I believe, what it means to have a life story, especially as a woman. So this is very much kind of another 20th century feminist writer, and I look forward to this. I do think I'll get to these at some point. Then Look at Me by Jennifer Egan, which I've never read. I've only read A Visit from the Goon Squad by her, and which I liked. So very famous writer of many accolades, and a good backlist. This is about a fashion model who gets into a car accident and her face is rebuilt, essentially, and so she has to deal with life kind of as a new person, I believe. I think there's sort of an alienation that happens as a result of having to be a new old you in many ways. So I think I will probably like it. Promise looked good. A Month in the Country by J.L. Carr, which what caught my eye was New York Review of Books, Spine, and then I remembered that Rebecca Eats Books had read it recently, and I believe liked it. The premise of it is an artisan coming back from the First World War, goes to a remote Yorkshire village to renovate, to redo a medieval church, essentially. And it's quite short also, and I think it's probably a really good weekend read at some point, or weekday random read, about forming a past, forming a future, etc., etc. So probably we'll get to this. And finally, in the local library hall is Canton Won't by Lydia Davis. So these are really micro short stories most of the time. Some of them are really, a paragraph long, a la Lydia Davis. And I don't know if I'll read this cover to cover, but I've generally enjoyed reading Lydia Davis in little spurts. In fact, I have the collected stories, which I love this big, beautiful book. And I've had this for years, and essentially what I do every so often is I read a story or two when the mood strikes me. So that's the local library haul. Let's see if I get through. Certainly I'm not going to get through all of it. Let's see if I get through any of it. I had just now this very vain idea that I would hold all of the books up, but it's just not going to happen. So in fact, I have 3 other books from my uni library, but that'll be for another day. So yeah. Have a good day, have a good reading experience, and shop. See you the next time.